I like games.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I like games a lot. They make me think, and I like it.
Yeah, can you give me like an expansion of your thoughts, your statement?
Yeah,
I want to see you expand it.
It makes me feel alive again, you know?
Expand on that. That's right, today it's time to talk about our favorite expansions for games.
I'm going to let people know right now, but first of all, I'm Nick.
I'm Mike.
We're the Brothers Murph,
Hi.
and we are going to talk about our favorite expansions. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to be disappointed.
I mean,
There's so many good expansions.
How could
There's
you-
going to be a lot of, what about this down in the comments? And honestly, that's fine. Hit us with it. We
You're
want to know
right.
about all of them, but you're going to be disappointed.
all the ones we don't say that you mentioned are correct. They're also
right.
so
You're right,
great.
we're wrong.
We couldn't possibly only do 10, but that is exactly what we're doing.
That's exactly what we're doing because we're rebels like that.
I know, we love expansions to games. Sometimes it makes a game great, takes it to a new level, fixes things or whatever. So these are our top 10 favorite expansions for our favorite board games.
Our number 10 is an expansion that a lot of people consider really, really essential, and that is the Valhalla expansion for Champions of Midgard. This basically takes the whole your warriors, your heroes dying, and gives them something to do, which makes sense because it's kind of like Norse mythology with Valhalla. So basically in this game, you are collecting these different kinds of warriors like axemen and swordsmen and spearmen, and you're using their dice, and you're using them to roll to fight monsters. The problem is those monsters can kill those dice, which makes sense, but then they just go away. And so then you have to go get more, go fight the monsters, which is totally fine. But the Valhalla expansion, whenever you have a warrior that dies, you essentially get a little chit that represents that warrior. And then over in Valhalla, you can spend those chits to do stuff. There's also big monsters in there you can fight. You can go and get like berserkers and shield maidens, which is like super, super cool. They're like really cool dice. And it basically takes a big part of the game that was kind of always like a setback, because you would go fight this monster, but then a lot of your people would die, you'd have to start over. And it now gives you something to do with those dice that are now gone. And on top of that, it makes thematic sense because Valhalla, the halls of Valhalla, it's super, super cool, and it just works really, really well, and it's just one of the best expansions out there. That's the Valhalla expansion for Champions of Midgard. It's our number 10.
So our number 9 is for the game that got us into the hobby, that is Pandemic, and this is the On the Brink expansion. I started off playing Pandemic with this expansion and never looked back. This expansion adds a virulent strain. It kind of changes the epidemic cards, and when the first epidemic card comes out, you look at which of the 4 diseases has the most cubes on the board, and that becomes your kind of virulent, most worst disease. And you're gonna have added challenges to get rid of and fix and change the game state because of these epidemic cards that are kind of ramped up. You can also go with more epidemics than you could in just the base game simply, and it just adds that extra level of difficulty that like really, really brought the tension and excitement in that game. So again, when I first started playing, it was with On the Brink, and I just never have looked back. It's one of those things that like, I'm really glad my first experience with Pandemic was with that expansion, because it just really changed things, and it's always gonna be one that we keep when we play Pandemic. We're always gonna play On the Brink at the very least. We may or may not ever use any other expansions, but we will for sure use that one, and that's why it's our number 9.
One of the best things you can do in any expansion is have a game you really like and then be like, all right, cool, now variable player powers. And that is what the Executives expansion does for the networks. To be fair, a lot of expansions do this, but we love the networks and we love the Executives expansion. In the networks, you run a TV studio and you're trying to get new shows like cool action shows or dramas or comedies, and you're putting them in different time slots. You're trying to score viewers, and you can put like celebrities on there and put ads on there to get money. It's really, really cool, really unique, really fun game that we absolutely adore. And then they had the Executives expansion, which now gives everyone a starting power, something that you do, and they're all wildly different. They're really, really cool. Some you start with a ton of money in the game and you're never allowed to get money again. So you really have to like budget your money, but you start off with a ton of money, which means you can usually get started out the gate way quicker than everyone else, but then you have to slow down as the game goes on. It's really, really interesting. There's all these different kinds of executives, and they all work really well, and it just does exactly what we want in a game expansion. A lot of times it's like, just take what we love and just make us all slightly different, and chef's kiss is just amazing. Executives for the Networks is our number 8.
So number 7 might be simply the most essential of the expansions, and it is Prelude for Terraforming Mars. This is a small set of cards for a very big engine building game that basically jumpstarts the game for you. So you're going to get to, at the start of the game, in addition to getting your corporations and your starting cards and everything, you're going to get 4 Prelude cards, of which you will keep and use 2. And these are going to be, before you even start the game officially, you're going to play these Prelude cards, and they're going to often give you bumps in production of steel or whatever it might be. They might give you the chance to put out a couple ocean tiles to start the game and get that terraform rating up. And it just does a bunch of things to sort of get the game as if you were dropping right into round 4 of the game, essentially. So you have some better production, you have more things going on, the game is already sort of on the way to being terraformed, and it just really helps get you right into the funnest bits of the game of building up that engine and starting to run that engine, all that resource production that you get. It sort of gets you there quicker, which I really appreciate. It's like, let me get to the funnest part as quick as possible. Prelude absolutely does that. It keeps the overall length of the game a little bit shorter, especially at those higher player counts for Terraforming Mars. So it's one that we will never play without, and it's just absolutely essential to us. So that's Prelude for Terraforming Mars, our number 7.
Our number 6 is an expansion that I didn't really think I needed until I played it, and that's the Railways of the North expansion for Great Western Trail. This expansion kind of took me by surprise. I was like, oh cool, an expansion for Great Western Trail. I like Great Western Trail, cool, I'm down to try it, and I absolutely adored it. This basically takes what was, in my opinion, kind of like the least interesting part of the game, which is when you go sell your cattle in Kansas City, you then would put your disc on one of the cities. By the way, Sacramento's on there. Sacramento's never in board games, so we get very excited. We're from Sacramento. So nonetheless, but you can put your disc on a different city like Kansas City, Sacramento, San Francisco, all of these different places. And that was kind of it. And then you would get money and you would turn in your cars. You go back to the beginning of the rondel and you go through the board again. But now with the Railways of the North expansion, there's a whole top of the board. There's all these little branchlets that you have that you can put out, and you can put all your branchlets up in this whole upper part of the board to get bonuses, and then also to unlock way more places that you can put your discs. And it just took, in my opinion, what was the least interesting part of the game and just like blew it wide open and made it so much more interesting. So now we have the rest of the game, which I already really loved, and then you have this part that I now also really, really loved. And to me, it just kind of completed the whole thing. And I'm just like, absolutely, I never want to play without it again. I absolutely adore Railways of the North. It's so good. And that is our number 6.
So number 5 is an example of something that I didn't realize in the base game was kind of lacking until this expansion came out. It's the Leviathan expansion for Abyss. Now in Abyss, it's this really kind of simple set collection, turning in cards game to ultimately get the influence of these kind of lords, and it's all this underwater kind of sea kingdom world, which is really cool with amazing art. And in that, you might flip over these eel cards as you're getting these cards out, and you simply have a choice of taking a certain reward from this monster track, or deciding to not do it, and the rewards become kind of more valuable, and you hope to kind of draw a monster card later to get a better reward. Which is fine, but it's sort of like an afterthought as you're playing. Now with the Leviathan expansion, that whole monster board goes away, and it's replaced with the ability to fight these like legendary sea creatures using those cards that you're turning in. So it makes all those cards that you're collecting a little bit more dynamic and usable, because you can use them for different things, and you can sort of collectively fight and hopefully take down these giant sea creatures and things, which is like, takes a sort of forgetful part of the game and makes it just as exciting as the rest of the game, which is quite good. So it's one of those that kind of completed the game for us. So Leviathan is just super good, and it's our number 5 for Abyss.
Our number 4 is an expansion that a lot of people consider to like fix the game or fix kind of a broken strategy. And this is the Oceania expansion for Wingspan. In the base game Wingspan, which we really, really love, we absolutely adore Wingspan, but there is what is considered to be the egg strategy. You get a point at the end of the game for every egg that you have. So a lot of times in the last round or the last 2 rounds, people will just get nothing but eggs, get a bunch of points. And a lot of people would complain because that was kind of like a broken strategy. And so Oceania really fixes all of that. And it gives you so much more to do. One, you get a ton more birds, which in a game like a big engine builder, like a Wingspan, just give me more birds. I just want more birds. I want more cool powers. That alone is enough. But then on Oceania, it gives you a whole new board, and it fixes some of the egg strategy stuff, but then it also gives you nectar. And nectar is a wild resource, which also just opens up the game so much more because you are limited to the amount of resources you get. But if you have a wild resource, it just allows you to do so much more. And with that new board, that new resource, it just takes the game and just boom, and just completes it. And I'm sure they're gonna have more expansions, more bursts, and more cool stuff coming out. But I'm like, man, people were right. This expansion is absolutely essential, at least in my opinion, because it just takes all the little things that, like, as much as I loved Wingspan, little things I didn't like that much, and it takes them, boom, fixes them up, and now we're good to go. The Oceania expansion for Wingspan is honestly really, really great, and I suggest you give it a try. It's our number 4.
Number 3 does similar to how Leviathan did. This took a game that I absolutely have no issues with. It was already my favorite game and made it even better. This is the Norwegians expansion for A Feast for Odin. A Feast for Odin is a gigantic worker placement game by Uwe Rosenberg, where you have just a 1,000 different options, and you're ultimately going through getting resources, getting different tiles, upgrading those tiles to put onto your little player board and fill up as much of that player board as you can. You can also explore islands and fill those up with these polyomino shaped tiles. Now the Norwegians expansion basically changes a few things that are really important. One, if you're playing a lower player count game, you're actually gonna have a different central board for those actions. So it's gonna make it a little bit more modified for a lower player count or a higher player count. And it takes a couple other areas where maybe at the end of a round you have one worker left over and there's not really a good space for you to go to. Now there's a whole different column that is specifically for 1 or 2 workers, but you have to end your round. So it's you get a better action basically to do at the end of your round, but you have to sort of strategically plan that out because you can't play after that. So it gives a few things where I'm like, this is okay, but you know, I maybe would have a forgetful turn. Now I have a really useful turn. These occupation cards were really hard to play, and now in the Norwegians expansion, they're much easier to play. So it takes everything that was not bad, but not remarkable, and bumped it up so that the entirety of the game is just really great and memorable now. So the Norwegians expansion for A Feast for Odin is super great, and that's why it's our number 3.
Our number 2 is one of our evangelism games and one of our evangelism expansions, and that is the Backstage expansion for Shakespeare. I'm actually not entirely sure how available Shakespeare is. I wish it was more available because it's a really incredible game, but it kind of has a bit of an issue with the way you choose actions. So you actually bid for your action in this game. You have 5 discs, so you have potential 5 actions, and then you choose how many you want to do, and then you all reveal at the same time. The thing is, whoever chooses the least amount of action gets to go first, and in this game, going first is a big deal. There are a very limited amount of supplies, and you really need to get to them quickly, but if you go first, a lot of times it means you only bid like 1 or 2 actions, which means you're not going to get to do as much, which is one part of the game that was always like, it was restrictive in my opinion in a good way, but it was incredibly restrictive. I still had a lot of fun with it. But the Backstage expansion, because in Shakespeare you're putting on a play, in the Backstage expansion, any discs you didn't bid for the main actions, you then get to use in the backstage. And there's gonna be a certain amount of cards out there, and those discs you didn't bid with, you then can use back there. And they do a whole bunch of different stuff. You can get more costume elements, you can get set elements, you can be a rag picker, so you can pick from like the discarded set elements, which is super cool. And so it makes the bidding part of it so much easier, because now you're like, well, heck, I'm only gonna bid 2 because I still can use these other actions. They're not just gone. It was a part of the game that felt probably a little too restrictive, and then just boom, completed it. And it really took a game that I feel was really, really great, really solid, absolutely loved it, but was like 75% of the way done and went bam and just finished it. And and at this point, I'm like, it is so good. I will never, ever, ever play without the Backstage expansion. If you've played Shakespeare, if you haven't, try and find the Backstage expansion. It's incredible. And it's also like this big. It's tiny, it's cheap, and it just, for such a small package, has such a strong punch. You gotta try it, it's great. The Backstage expansion for Shakespeare is our number 2.
Sometimes you take an already great game, a game that we loved for a very long time and loved it thoroughly, and then we get an expansion and we say, why did I ever play the other version of the game? This is just so much infinitely better. And that's the case with Tuscany for Viticulture. Viticulture is a fantastic game all about making wine and selling that wine to thirsty customers. And you're kind of going through the process of getting grapes into fields, harvesting those grapes, turning those grapes into wine, and then selling that wine. And you do this in 2 different seasons. You do it kind of in the spring and then the fall, or the summer and winter rather. And then with Tuscany, it does this awesome thing of gives you a different board that actually has all 4 seasons. You have spring, summer, fall, and winter, all complete with their own different worker placement spaces. And so it just takes everything with viticulture and expands it out a little bit. Takes you deeper into the game without adding a ton of complexity. There's more to think about for sure, but it keeps a lot of the familiarity and just goes deeper and really fills it out in a beautiful way. One that once we got it, we had played and loved viticulture for some time before finally trying Tuscany, and we just got to fall in love with the game all over again because it was that much more compelling. It was already great and it went to another level, and it adds these cool structures you can build. It just adds a lot of really fun elements to it, while really kind of making you feel the year out and having to use your workers more specifically, because now you have 4 different seasons and you only have so many workers to spare. So you really have to kind of think a little bit deeper about what you're trying to do and how to sequence it all, which is really fun for us as lovers of viticulture. Tuscany is a no-brainer. That's why it's our number 1.
So how disappointed were you?
Be honest. Listen, there's so many more. We could
I know,
fire off another list.
Skullport for Lords of Waterdeep. We know.
So
we
many.
know. I know. We just
So many. Crokinole. It's more discs. That was
it's a multi-tiered board.
Yeah, it was an underappreciated expansion.
Yeah.
That's our favorite expansions, everybody. Let us know your favorite expansions in the comments below. Your favorite expansions for games, and why do you like them so much? What does it add? What does it fix or change? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, and let us know other topics you would like to see us cover. Yeah. Designers, mechanics, themes, whatever. Let us know in the comments below. What top 10 you'd like to see from us next? And until next time, I'm Nick.
I'm Mike.
We're the Brothers Murph.
See you in the next top 10.
Bye, everybody.